I gave my mom a call, and she said that she remembers each and every one of you. You all must have really worn her out. Well done, Ask Men. Story 1. I was in high school freshman year in physics. It was crowded, and everyone was standing or out of their seats. This girl, whom I had known for some time and who I knew wanted his attention, moved right in front of me to get by. She brushed against me, and it was clear she knew what she was doing. I was aroused for the rest of the day. Story 2. I have relayed this before on Reddit, but why not relive my own cluelessness? I was in high school, and my parents were away for the weekend, so I had a little party with a bunch of my friends. Probably my best friend at the time was a young lady. Let's call her Jen. Jen and I hung out nearly every day. We get high, go fishing, drive around, whatever bored teens do. Looking back, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, except I didn't have the courage to actually try to kiss her. We all had fun at my little party, and it was time for bed. I told Jen that there were unused beds in my sister's room, my parents' room, the guest room, and the couches in the living room. She said she didn't want to take up a space that another partygoer could use. So if it wasn't a big deal, she'd just sleep in my twin bed with me. I thought of myself as a forward-thinking, respectful young man, so this seemed totally plausible. We went to bed, and she said she was warm. I offered to open the window, but she proceeded to unzip her jeans and toss them on the floor. Jen was a pretty open, unashamed girl, so I told myself it was no big deal. She was just being comfortable, and I shouldn't make things awkward. She then said, "I hope you don't mind. I'm a cuddler," and threw an arm over my chest and a leg over my crotch. To teenage me, I tried to tell myself that this was just her being affectionate, but I didn't want to spoil it all by assuming her physical contact was sexual, even though she lay partially on top of me in just a t-shirt and underwear. Then she leaned in for the kiss. It was dark, and I assumed she thought I was facing her. But at the time, she only pecked my cheek, and I told myself, no, this is normal. Platonic friends peck each other on the cheek before cuddling to sleep in their underwear. We fell asleep and woke in each other's arms the next morning with her pointing out the situation I'd been dealing with the entire night. Jen and I have remained in contact. She is now married with 2 kids, and I was actually a groomsman in her wedding because we were such good friends. In the years that have passed since, I feel I've become a friend of her husband, who I think is a top-notch guy. She has, however, teased me about that instance and a few others where she was coming on to me and I was too shy to act. The lesson here is to be respectful but take your shot, and if you're denied, stay respectful and move on. I wanted to be respectful as a young man but didn't know you could still be respectful while also trying to express interest. You can. You just have to be alright if someone says you can't. Story 3. Once I was at a concert. Punk rock show with moshing or whatever. I was around the edge of the pit and this girl got pushed into me. Straight body-to-body contact. I got excited really fast, and she didn't move away. Story 4. During the summer, when I'm at home, I don't wear underwear under my shorts because it's cooler and more comfortable. One summer, I had friends over for a barbecue. One of my friends made a beeline toward me and sat on my lap to have a chat. I should preface this by saying she was wearing a very thin, floaty summer dress. Anyway, she sat directly on my upper thigh, which is where my penis was resting. I'd like to remind you I'm not wearing any underwear, just some shorts. She initially jumped up a little, looked at me a bit surprised, and then sat back down on it a bit more gently, placing it directly on her genitals. She then proceeded to have a conversation with everyone present while stroking the back of my head and slowly moving around on my lap. She stayed there for the rest of the night until everyone left, and as soon as the last person closed the gate to leave, we intimately engaged with each other on my back lawn. It's amazing how much hours of teasing and tension can enhance a romantic encounter. Story 5. Met somebody through a dating app and we spent a couple of weeks chatting before deciding to meet up. We talked on the phone a few times and the chemistry was off the charts. We were chatting the night before the date and somehow ended up having phone sex. We met up the next day and were playing it cool. I'm cautious with dating, so the phone sex was out of my comfort zone a tiny bit, but still enjoyable. Anyway, we're walking about getting used to each other physically and talking about whatever. It probably took less than an hour before her tongue was down my throat. We spent about an hour kissing but decided to stop because it had started to get pretty chilly. We went for food and had a couple of drinks. She let it slip what some of her physical turn-ons are. She mentioned how her neck is extremely sensitive, to the point that she could orgasm from neck stimulation. So, of course, I kept that in mind for later. We headed out and walked about some more. I leaned in close and pointed towards something, pretending to be showing her something cool. She tilted her head to look, and I kissed her neck, which she definitely wasn't anticipating. She literally moaned out loud and pushed me into the nearest wall, and her hands were everywhere. So were mine. The drinks had helped ease my cautious side. Then she stopped and looked at me and asked me to take her home with me. I wasn't as on guard as I'd normally be, but I was still ever so slightly cautious. I wasn't drunk. I've never had sex on the first date before. I typically wait for the second or third, so I hesitated. We'd already talked about that and had made plans for how she'd get home. I never said yes or no, but she sensed my hesitation. So she pleaded with me, "Please take me home with you." And I could see the desperation on her face. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was likely the most sexually tense moment I've ever found myself in. Story 6. In terms of tension, a couple of nights ago when I was in the pool with a couple of guy friends, I am female, we were throwing a football, and I had that classic fighting to catch the ball situation with one of them. I hadn't seen this guy in years. He used to be really shy. Let's just say he touched me a lot more than he touched the football. Story 7. A long time ago, I was in the queue to enter a nightclub with some friends. It was a party organized by the student union of my university in a fancy nightclub. Lots of people were eager to get in. Everybody was pushing in the queue, and I got pressed against the back of a rather pretty girl. I couldn't do anything, and my groin was right against her. I was doing my best to keep my 19-year-old self calm. Then her friends started to ask her, "So, how are you dressed under your coat?" She was dressed sexy. Story 8. Those who remember a story I've told a couple of times here involving a casual encounter that ended up with sex in a dentist chair, this is the same girl a few weeks later. I met her downtown. I normally hate cigarettes and can't stand them, but when I met her at the subway station, she was smoking. She wasn't trying to do anything special, but the way she would draw it to her mouth, take a drag, and slowly exhale was one of those moments where I just got excited instantly. She teased me all afternoon until we went to a coffee shop. We were sitting at a table and accidentally grazed fingers reaching for our drinks. We sat there touching fingertips while intensely looking at each other. After a couple of minutes, she excused herself, got up, and headed to the wheelchair-accessible/unisex bathroom. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was her. She wanted me to meet her in there. I did, and until that point, I'd never been pinned against a wall by a woman before. Didn't think I would find myself in the bathroom of a coffee shop when I woke up that morning. As I walked her back to the subway station, where she had to catch her train and I had to take mine, her train was late. It wouldn't be in for another 20 minutes. So we sat down on a bench against a wall and talked. She kept on teasing me and then said to put my arm behind her, reach inside her pants, and pick a spot to explore because she wanted me to have a reminder on my way home. There were hundreds of people on this platform. Did I do it? Of course I did. But if I wasn't nervous half the time, she was a train wreck of a person, but the sexual tension and chemistry were on a whole different level with her. Story 9. Experienced. I was about to leave my then girlfriend's house because my sister was picking me up. When I arrived at the door, we didn't kiss during the whole day. I said, "Wait," and started to kiss her so intensely. We went for about 5 minutes, kissing like the world was going to end, and then my sister called me, upset because I was taking too long. I hung up, and we started kissing again without thinking. My then girlfriend started dry humping me, and I thought that was the hottest thing in the world. A few minutes later, we heard my girlfriend's mom coming, saying, "There's a car parked outside waiting for your boyfriend." We opened the door, and my girlfriend and I were breathing heavily, and I had a very awkward situation in my jeans. That was amazing but really painful. Edit. I was inside the house at the door. My girlfriend's parents were upstairs, and my sister was in the car outside in the driveway. Story 10. A woman I ended up dating, whom I was friends with for a year, told me about her sexual frustration with me before we dated. The place we worked had showers, and she snuck in and locked the door to masturbate 2 times. She also had a lot of sex dreams about me. Story 11. Once I went out on a date with an old crush of mine. She was totally into me and I was totally into her, but long story short, we could not be together. After the date, she slept at my place, and things became heated quickly. The problem was that she was craving me but couldn't do anything because I was a sort of crush to one of her friends. I played my moves pretty well and we made out a lot during the night, but she never wanted to go further. She kept on saying, "We shouldn't do this, and why does it have to be so hard?" Not referring to my situation, that was intense from the start. Then at one point, while I was sleeping, she woke me up, and suddenly the situation escalated when I told her that I would like to see how much she wanted me. She jumped on me and started to grind on me while kissing, biting my chest, neck, lips, and shoulders. I didn't climax because it lasted briefly, as she soon realized she shouldn't do that to her friend. I slept with that intense feeling all night, waking up still in the same state. I had never felt so much sexual tension and never wanted to be with someone so intensely. In the morning, I drove her home, tired and sad, but luckily my mother was already on the way to my house as she did every Sunday. Finally, someone helped alleviate my frustration. Story 12. Rather recently, my new friend and I were going to the same event in another country and decided to go a day early and share a hotel room for intimacy. We had never slept with each other before, but both of us wanted to. One day before, she told me that she had actually fallen in love with someone. While everyone involved is typically polyamorous and open, and would not have a problem with us being intimate, she decided to be abstinent until meeting him again during the event to avoid emotional distraction. So, we spent a few days very close together, both really wanting to be intimate with each other and being extremely flirtatious, but nothing could happen. Fortunately for me, she changed her mind during the event and after meeting him. But until then, I had never experienced such heavy and obvious sexual tension with anyone. Story 13. Junior year of high school, hanging out with my girlfriend. Her parents were wealthy, and they had a separate guest house on their property, so we would watch movies there. Her dad, who was a muscular oral surgeon, would occasionally stop in to make sure everything was appropriate. One night, things were starting to progress at a rapid rate, but we couldn't do anything sexual because her dad could pop in at any moment. Long story short, I got the worst discomfort I've ever experienced in my life, and I had to fabricate an excuse to leave her house early because it was such agonizing pain. I couldn't even relieve myself. It was that bad, and I had to sleep it off. Story 14. 2 standouts. 1. A guy I had a crush on for a long time. We were at a house party. I was sleepy and curled up on the couch. He came over to ask if I was okay and started rubbing my back. He did it for a few minutes, and then we ended up holding hands and making out. The tension that built up as he was gently rubbing my back was crazy. A guy I was friends with whom I was mad about. I planned on telling him I was into him to see if he felt the same way. One of my friends kissed him the night before I wanted to tell him. She knew I wanted to talk to him, and they ended up dating for 2 years after that. 7 or 8 years later, there was a reunion for a club night we always went to. Everyone was reminiscing about school and college, and someone cracked a joke about his ex. I said, "Yeah, and she stole you from me." He asked what I meant, and I told him. Apparently, he had a crush on me and thought he didn't have a chance. We made out intensely that night. Story 15. Oh, definitely during family weekend after I graduated from 1 station unit training for the Army. My parents, little brother, girlfriend, and her parents all came down to watch me graduate. They picked me up the day before graduation around 11 a.m. when my pass started. We all spent the day together, went out to eat, sightseeing, etc. My girlfriend and I had been holding in months' worth of sexual desire that was just waiting to erupt at any moment. Months' worth of graphic letters and zero intimacy made the sexual tension meter nearly burst at the seams. We spent all day embracing each other, holding hands, and being as close to one another as we could due to the fact we hadn't seen each other in quite some time. As we were on our way back to base to drop me off, all 7 of us stopped at Walmart to get a couple of things. I suggested to my girlfriend that we go to the family restroom to have a quick encounter. She was interested in the idea but nervous due to how public it was. Neither of us preferred that we were in a Walmart, but desperate times call for desperate measures. We needed to find a way to get away from everyone else. I was determined to be intimate. I had ingested 6 shots of espresso earlier that day, and as we were leaving Walmart, I played the caffeine overload sickness card, which separated us from the pack. We both went to the family restroom in the back of the store and had remarkable intimacy. Totally worth it.